Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. And in case you didn't notice, we are still snowed in Nashville, Drew down in Orlando. And sometimes you write a script for a show and then they just write themselves. So at this point, 12:11 Central Time, former five-star Caleb Downs, consensus All-American as a freshman. He's in the transfer portal. Georgia seems to be the team to beat there. And then shortly after that, how about former five-star and number one offensive tackle in the 2023 cycle, Kadyn Proctor, also in the portal. How big of a hit is that for Alabama? Well, Kadyn Proctor started all 14 games. Caleb Downs, the nucleus in the face of that Alabama team, not even the defense, the entire team. So, Drew, one little thing. We started with Caleb Downs yesterday. I think we talked about Alabama, what this would be like for Kalen DeBoer. Well, first things first, he's got his hands full as two of his best players, and not just guys who only have 1 year of eligibility left, but guys that have multi-year eligibility jump in the portal. And just when you think things couldn't get any worse with the departure of Caleb Downs, Kadyn Proctor follows shortly thereafter. The Tide still hanging on for dear life to a couple more guys. We'll see what happens with the likes of Justice Haynes and maybe a few more. But Drew, your raw reaction to Caleb Downs and Kadyn Proctor in the portal this morning?
This is like a new coach showing up to an NFL team, right? And the top rookies are now free agents, unrestricted free agents, or maybe they have a priority tag. I don't know. They can match whatever offer there is out there. But it is, I think it's concerning for your Alabama because you said it, Cooper. I mean, if you probably made a list of all the guys there in Tuscaloosa that you needed to retain, I think the list starts number one, Caleb Downs, and then number two, Kadyn Proctor. And maybe you could positional value, put Proctor ahead of Downs, but Downs was the real deal. Sean Alexander, freshman of the year, played the most snaps for the Crimson Tide. We saw him almost come down with that insane interception to open up the Rose Bowl. And then Kadyn Proctor, there were some lumps early on. That's expected with a young offensive tackle, but by season's end, I mean, he was one of their top guys. There were some occasions where they would go tackle over. He would open up some lanes. So concerning for Kalen DeBoer, but we were talking before we hit go on this podcast, Cooper. You know, I think if you're an Alabama player, you have all the leverage. You can enter the transfer portal, right? You can renegotiate whatever deal you got going on. I think if I'm an agent representing these guys, I would tell everyone just to enter to see what's out there and then kind of twist the arm of the school. That's just the reality we are in with college football.
There's so many different levels to this when you look at what scope are you looking at it from, right? Are you Kalen DeBoer? Are you Kirby Smart? Are you just a fan of college football who's trying to understand what's happening right now? And Kalen DeBoer obviously hired in the last week to replace the greatest coach, collegiate coach of all time in Nick Saban. We said it, the resume, 6 national championships, 10 SEC titles, 10 out of the 17 years that he was there in Tuscaloosa, number one ranked recruiting classes. And this is a roster that still ranks per the 24/7 Sports composite talent rankings, number one in the country. Now with Caleb Downs out, with Kadyn Proctor out as well, presumably. You think about this on the other side, Drew, it's kind of like blood in the water. And if you're Kirby Smart, not only do you have the chance to land a potential top 10 talent, I think pound for pound, one of the best players in the country in Caleb Downs, but you also have the opportunity to really grab a hold of the narrative as well, right? Like, who is the top dog in college football? And before this past year, Georgia had won 2 consecutive national championships. They were vying for their third. This has so many different, I would say, ripple effects, unintended consequences. But if you're Georgia right now, I think this is a real chance to seize some momentum and talk about it. If you compound the fact that a big part of the reason that Caleb Downs will potentially end up in Athens, it also has to do with Kirby Smart removing a close friend on his staff in the defensive secondary and Will Muschamp putting him off the field, which makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. We'll get into that in a second. And then go and getting Travaris Robinson, from Alabama, making him your co-DC. It's a little bit of 3D chess here. So not only are they potentially landing one of the best players in the country, but I think this kind of moves the needle from a 30,000 feet big picture standpoint as well, if Georgia's able to pull this one off.
Well, who's the guy that got away in the 2023 cycle? It was Caleb Downs. and it was Justice Haynes. Remember, after Kirby Smart won the national title 2 years ago, the first school he flew the Kirby copter to, it was Mill Creek for Caleb Downs. They tried and they tried and they tried, but Nick Saban won out in the end. So you're right. We talked about those recruitments and getting them in the secondary recruitment. This would be big for Georgia. And Cooper, let's say Caleb Downs ends up at Georgia, right? It seems like there's some smoke there. I think if we had betting odds, the Bulldogs would be the clear-cut favorite to get Caleb Downs. You know, Matt Zenitz, all those guys have done an excellent job kind of setting the stage for what is going on right now. And heck, by the time people are listening to this podcast or watching this show, Caleb Downs could already be announced to Georgia. Georgia, let's say Caleb Downs joined them. In 2024, they could field a starting 11 on defense, and every guy would be a 24/7 Sports 5-star from the 2021 cycle and on. Not surprising, I guess, maybe just given how Kirby Smart has built that roster. But to my eye, it's like, whoa, especially when you toss into the fact that Georgia's lost some guys to the transfer portal. Marvin Jones Jr. went to Florida State, A.J. Harris to Penn State, Nyland Green to Purdue. Those guys were all 5-stars. But, Cooper, this would be kind of your back seven. C.J. Allen, not a 5-star. Raylan Wilson, 5-star. Could be Justin Williams, our number 1 ranked linebacker. In the secondary, Dalen Everett, 5-star. You got Julian Humphrey, Daniel Harris, 2 4-stars. We've raved about Ellis Robinson, our number 3 ranked player in the 2024 cycle, already enrolled. That's a 5-star corner. But the secondary, in terms of those safeties, Jonel Aguero, your nickelback, Caleb Downs, Malachi Starks. That's the number 1 ranked safety, the number 2 ranked safety, and the number 1 athlete in the country. And then obviously they got pass rushers, Michael Williams at the edge, Ingram Dawkins, Jordan Hall, Nazir Stackhouse. I mean, that would be – we always see the graphics of Alabama's defense from a few years ago and with all the NFL logos next to the guys and where they ended up getting selected. But on paper, I mean, that might be the most talented defense ever.
Yeah, pretty good. I don't know if there's ever even been a hypothetical whisper of one program putting an 11 out that would be all 5-stars or guys even in that realm. You think about that, the thing that really kind of stuck out to me, how about the trio of Malachi Starks and Caleb Downs and a KJ Bolden, and not to mention Aguero, who was knocking on the door of 5-star status just a year ago as well. So you think about the versatility, the way that they can move these guys around, attack opposing offenses as well. It's pretty crazy. And not to mention, if there was a program out there that's been recruiting the point of attack in the front seven better than anybody in the country, especially the second level, it's been Georgia. So the fact that you can just casually add a guy like Caleb Downs to that is pretty remarkable. Drew, let's flip back to Alabama a little bit. There's some of this that was expected. I think when Kalen DeBoer took over for Nick Saban, I think that was the expectation. I don't know who you could have hired, maybe 2 or 3 guys, Kirby Smart himself, maybe a guy like Steve Sarkisian, maybe a guy like Dan Lanning, that you wouldn't see these type of defects from a roster as rapidly as we've seen it. But if you're Kalen DeBoer, I mean, what is the outlook here? Let's just call it over the next week, right? Because there are a couple high-profile names that are flying off the board as we speak. And Caleb Downs and Kadyn Proctor already this morning. There have been some whispers about guys like Justice Haynes too. And we all know it's kind of a domino effect. But if you're Kalen DeBoer right now, what is the game plan really for, hey, Wednesday, January 17th to the 24th? What do we got to do to keep this roster intact?
You're meeting with the players, right? And you might know a little bit better than me, having been on the personnel side, but it's not like exit meetings. They're kind of more of introduction meetings. Hey, we would like for you to stick around. I think what says a lot, T-Rob, right? I mean, we saw DeBoer make a run at Tavares Robinson to get him to come in and run in the defense. And I think that's kind of we need a familiar face in the building who is going to pitch and relay our message. And the reality is, we've discussed it. I mean, how many of those guys on Alabama's roster were recruited by Kalen DeBoer? I mean, he has not been in the footprint. So it's you introducing and trying to get these guys to believe in you more so. Hey, you saw me in the national title, but this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm about. And I think it's a really, really difficult position, especially, with the route he has gone in terms of assembling his staff. A lot of guys he's bringing with him from Washington, some people that, weren't in the SEC, sitting in the living rooms, right, hosting these kids on junior days. So it's a new face, Coop. I mean, if me and you all of a sudden got a new boss at 24/7 Sports, I think we would have some questions as well.
Are you hitting the portal if something ever happens to our boy Adam Stanko? Is that what you're saying right now? Implying that? Yeah, I think
I'm contractually locked in. I don't know. I got my NIL deal, so I got to talk to the collective.
Yeah, we got to figure out that 30-day window thing. The other part about this that was interesting, I was just on with Emily Proud and John Talty, who covers Alabama for Bama 247, does a remarkable job, by the way, and been tracking everything that's happened since Kalen DeBoer has been brought over from Washington to the departures since that time. He was talking about, hey, there in years past, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years or so, there's been really kind of inside the walls of that Alabama program, common knowledge of saying, hey, there's some potential opportunities that we've been able to work out with our roster because of the benefit long term of playing for a guy like Nick Saban and his track record of developing 49 first round draft choices that maybe one or two other coaches in the country really kind of have that advantage. That is not going to be the case in terms of the hometown discount of these guys coming to say, you know what, I'll put a little money to the side. I'll sacrifice that in the short term, but the long-term gain is more important to me. Kalen DeBoer does not have that advantage. That advantage is out of the window. You and I were talking about the parity in the game now and what that Alabama logo means. It certainly carries a lot of weight, but now more than ever, the game is more transactional than it's ever been. So you see guys like Kadyn Proctor hit the portal. I think the other thing is we saw this with Lance Hurd and LSU, right? It seemed like a guy who had a comfortable future carved out for him, the former 5-star. He hits the portal. And guess what? Somebody's going to pay top dollar for Lance Hurd like the same they're going to do for Kadyn Proctor and Caleb Downs, right? A lot of money being thrown around for some of the best players and rare players to hit the market. So that is the name of the game. Kalen DeBoer, it's like that meme, right, of who's our guy, Childish Gambino or whatever his name, walks into the living room, it's on fire, he's got the pizza boxes, right? That's kind of what Kalen DeBoer is dealing with right now. He's going to have to find a way to really kind of stabilize that program over the next couple of weeks. And Drew, that's kind of the word that I think about. If you're Kalen DeBoer, just find a way to get on level footing over the next couple of weeks. So a lot of Alabama talk, as you would probably expect this time of year. Some notable departures that aren't common this time around. And obviously that started with Nick Saban and the ripple effects that he has caused. So for all of the needs that you need, recruiting needs and college football recruiting needs as well, you can find right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. You can find the Oyster Boys right here every Tuesday and Wednesday at 5 o'clock Eastern time. Guys, if you are locked in right now, especially on the chat, make sure to like and subscribe. That helps us out tremendously. Drew, talked a lot about the portal, and there's still a couple names left on the board when we talk about the high school ranks as well. One of my favorite conversations I think we can generically have, we have a bucket of players. We can go anywhere here, and I'll tee you up on this. But there's still a couple of guys that didn't sign in the December signing period. They're waiting until that February, that first week for the second signing day, or whatever you want to call it, traditional signing day. But a lot of guys out there that can still, I would say, move the needle for some programs. So, Drew, I'll just start off the top. Who's your favorite BPA candidate out there right now?
Your guy, Terry Bussey, right? He's out at the Polynesian Bowl. You read Greg Biggins, Blair Angulo, Brandon Huffman. They have coverage from the islands. Jealous that they got that assignment, Cooper. I'm sure you're super jealous with you walking around your house in pajama pants. You could be in a bathing suit out in Hawaii right now. But no, Terry Bussey, I mean, guy that was on the freaks list. We saw him at the Under Armour All-America game. I mean, honestly, one of just kind of the top humans I interacted with all week long during check-in. I said, hey, are you going to play offense? Are you going to play defense? He says, I can play whatever. And then he had a toss in the fact that he had scored 33 points on the hardwood the night before he got on the plane and flew to Orlando. I'm like, not many kids in this in this ballroom can say that. But I think we've teased it on this show. It has since been reported, he's going to take an official visit to Georgia. We just went over kind of all those guys on defense for the Bulldogs. But hey, if Terry Bussey is going to UGA, I'm all for him playing offense, because it's going to be hard year one, year two to crack that rotation on the back end. So he's the one. Hudson Standish, he has long championed Terry Bussey on the scouting team. He was telling us yesterday in one of our calls that he thinks LSU is a team to watch. I also get super kind of jazzed up and excited about that when you think about the new look defensive staff there in Baton Rouge. Blake Baker coming over from Missouri, Corey Raymond coming back in the secondary. I mean, I like Terry Bussey on defense. I get it. Everyone else thinks he's a guy that's on offense, but he's someone that could come in right away and I think help shore things up on the back end. And then obviously you got Texas A&M, Mike Elko just picked up a commitment from former 5-star corner Des Ricks in the transfer portal. So a ton of different options to me. One where I think we're going to be sitting on set Wednesday, January 7th, and someone's getting a difference maker and a guy that can play early.
Yeah, I think we heard from our good friend Hudson Standish that we're talking about that Georgia visit kind of raised some eyebrows for us. And he said, I think a lot would have to happen for him to end up at Georgia. The fact that Georgia is getting a visit means that Georgia is in there, right? That's the other thing about that. Drew, here's what I want to bring up about Terry Bussey that I like the fact that you kind of pointed it out. You talked about the person, right? And when I was asked about Caleb Downs earlier this morning and what makes Caleb Downs, and what makes him rare, I mean, you can go off on a tangent of different tangibles of what makes Caleb Downs special. But really, at the end of the day, it's about the person and raving about the person. And I'm talking about like the football character, right? And you kind of look at, all right, what are some commonalities in the two guys that we're talking about? I would say both those guys, three-phase players, and Caleb Downs and Terry Bussey coming out of high school respectively. You look at Terry Bussey, multi-sport background as well, willing to do whatever it takes, right? Win at all costs type of players. I would put both Caleb Downs and Terry Bussey in that category. So you talk about a special player and a guy, humility standpoint, that tells you, hey, it doesn't matter what side of the ball I'm going to play at. Ultimately, I'm going to be successful in whatever I got to do to help my team is what I'm going to do. Now, here's what I think about Terry Bussey. I think he's going to end up playing offense, whether it's at Georgia, whether it's at LSU, whether it's at A&M. We'll see what happens with him. But the fact that you got a choice to do that is pretty special, and it says a lot about the athlete. Drew, how about this one for me? I'm going to stick with the receivers, if you want to call it that. How about Ryan Williams, man? I mean, one of the best in the country, number 3 receiver right now, number 10 ranked player out of the state of Alabama. And this is a guy who's committed to Alabama for a long time, reclassed from 25 to 24, did not sign in December. And it seems like it's all been Alabama, Auburn, Alabama getting another OV, Auburn getting an OV here, Texas, LSU going to take their swings as well. I think he's one of the best players in the country, hence the category of BPA. But think about what this dude could do for a program like Auburn. We just raved about Walker White and what we saw from him in San Antonio. Now you think about the idea of a Ryan Williams, a Cam Coleman, a Perry Thompson, a Malcolm Simmons, a Bryce Kane. I mean, that is 5 deep of maybe 3 of those guys have legitimate chances to go in the top 32 to 50 at the next level. And that's not something I'm typically comfortable saying when they're still seniors in high school. So Ryan Williams, to me, man, you talk about guys that could like change the perception of what a program is going to be offensively. That's the dude for me.
Who would be the biggest luxury, right? Like Texas getting him kind of, it would be all right. Jonte Cook, Isaiah Bond. Who else? They also added Silas Bolden via the transfer portal. Like, I don't think Texas is the school that necessarily needs Ryan Williams. And I think with Auburn, you rave about that wide receiver haul. And what are the Tigers calling Ryan Williams? Kind of the Infinity Stone? Is that the and the Freeze
right.
5? I know is a nickname.
Right. Yeah, the Infinity Stone is the other one. You don't seem like a marble guy, but yes, the Infinity Stone.
I am not a marble guy. You caught me red-handed there. But he kind of, I mean, look at Washington's playoff run, right? I mean, you discussed this when we were in San Antonio. I think we were flying out there, and I asked you, what makes off that Washington offense click? And it's, hey, you got to cover 4 really good wide receivers. And I think if you're Auburn, it's just potentially putting another guy that not only can create separation in his route, but also after the catch. And you're going to pair him with Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, who's a bigger type, and then you got Malcolm Simmons, Bryce Kane, kind of more in that speedster slot role. It would unlock some things, and we saw Walker White, his deep ball in San Antonio at the All-American Bowl. It would fire me up about the direction of that offense for the Tigers. So no, I think you could make a case he is the BPA over Terry Bussey, just where we are kind of in football passing league. Guys want to air it out, and he is someone that, even though he's 16 years old, I mean, he looks like the real deal.
2 of the most dynamic players in the country right there. I just mentioned Terry Bussey and Ryan Williams. Drew, we could stick with the receiver theme, but is there another player in your mind that maybe kind of inches up in this category?
What about Noah Carter? Washington signee. I mean, me and you were texting back and forth this morning. Signed with Washington out of Arizona, a guy we moved up into the top 247, was at the All-American Bowl, dominated one of the practices, isn't maybe the longest cat, but he can get to the quarterback. He can bend, go speed to power while running the arc, and signed with Washington, but he tweeted out an Alabama offer. I don't even know if that's legal now that I think about it. Normally you have to get released from your national letter of intent to be back out on the market. But obviously he has ties to that staff that was there in Seattle. All those guys are there in Tuscaloosa. So to me, he's one where I've always kind of wondered why more of those West Coast teams hadn't prioritized him. I think he kind of backed that up in San Antonio based on what we saw, that eye test, how he performed not only in practices, in the game. So, is it Alabama assuming he gets out of the paperwork, out of his signature, or does some of these other schools get involved? And let's not forget Jed Fish bringing a good chunk of his staff from Arizona to Washington. Noah Carter was a guy that was in state for them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Didn't really think about that. The other point that comes to mind is, it's a late offer for Alabama, and I don't mind it, especially when you think about the attrition that they've been dealing with over the last couple of days since Kalen DeBoer has arrived. But you think about that room, Drew. I mean, think of this. Keon Keeley, the guy that we had ranked in the top 5 last year, the number 1 edge rusher in the country, barely even played, right? And then you think about Yanze Pierre, another 5-star as well. So what Alabama has in that room is an extremely, extremely high standard. It's going to be interesting to see. For me, that's kind of the biggest question is, Nick Saban Alabama program was so relentless to their standards. They knew what an Alabama player looked like, felt like, executed like on Saturdays. What's that going to be like for Kalen DeBoer? Is there going to be a little, is there going to be some give there when it comes to the standard of their player? Or is there going to be, hey, we'll take some players with more developmental upside that might take a little bit more season, but we feel confident with our staff, right? So that's going to be interesting. And listen, with guys like Kirby Smart, guys like Lane Kiffin, you can go down the list, Mike Norvell, Billy Napier, making life a lot more difficult in the coming days and months ahead. For Kalen DeBoer, it's going to be interesting to see how he adjusts there. But a late offer out for Noah Carter, a very good player, and would be a very good pickup for Alabama nonetheless. Drew, go ahead.
Can I tack on there? So I think what you're saying, right, is Noah Carter isn't Dallas Turner.
What I'm saying is that there might be 2 programs in the country that have a ungodly expectation of what a 3-4 jack outside linebacker should look like.
Right.
And that's Alabama and Georgia. And, those 2 might be the only schools battling it out for these 6 or 7 players that actually fit them, right? We just raved about Kirby Smart and his front 7 and what he's got coming down the line. You think about guys like Jalen Walker and Damon Wilson and Marvin Jones, who just hit the portal because there might not be enough snaps for him, right? He's going to Florida State. That's what I'm saying. That's what you're competing with. And I'm not knocking on Noah Carter. I'm just saying you're in the 1% of the 1%. At least that's what it's been. Is that what it's going to be moving forward? I don't know.
Right. You're getting tier A right? Now maybe you got to go top of tier B a little bit, which is fine. Those are still great players, but that hasn't been kind of the standard there in the past.
Right, you're shopping at Whole Foods. Now you might have to shop at Publix. At least how my wife looks at the steak section. No knock on Publix. Love Publix, by the way. Drew, for me, how about Gatlin Baird, dude? I mean, I love this guy. Got to see him in San Antonio along with the rest of us. I thought he really impressed during the week. Had a little bit of a tough game, but in terms of a guy acclimating from the state of Idaho with some of the best players in the country, I didn't think he had an issue at all. So you think about some of the best players in the country left on the board, currently ranked number 36, 4 spots outside the top 32, the number 10 receiver, and an absolutely loaded receiver class. He's got the 10-1-8 to his name, decorated track and field background. Michigan, Oregon, I want to get ahead of the curve here. Like a lot of people have thought Gatlin Baird to Michigan's kind of a done deal. What happens if Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL? He's already interviewed with the Chargers in the Atlanta Falcons. Drew, in the next couple of weeks, that could then just pop open the door for Dan Lanning. And then once again, it's just that caliber of player just falls in his lap.
I wish Gatlin wasn't going on that mission trip, right? Because I don't know. It was on 24/7 Sports front page, Cooper, on Tuesday. And it was kind of projecting Michigan's too deep for the 2024 season on offense. And they're losing a lot of individuals, obviously, to the NFL draft. They need some help at wide receiver. And I think Gatlin Baird kind of gives them maybe something that they don't have in terms of like a bigger body that can go and get vertical. I remember Roman Wilson off to the league. I think he's going to be in the Senior Bowl. So I think, Michigan would make a ton of sense. And I thought from a player development standpoint, I've always thought Gatlin Baird in Ann Arbor with what that strength program has done, how they've coached those guys up, that is his best chance to succeed. But you're right. I mean, what happens with Jim Harbaugh and him continuing to be linked to the NFL jobs? Oregon, they have recruited the transfer portal extremely well at the wide receiver position. I'm still waiting for one of these high school guys that they've reeled in recent years to kind of break through. I mean, remember Kyle Casper, a reclass from a few years ago, another freaky athlete. He's played limited minutes. Who was it? Ashton Kozart transferred out. So Gatlin Baird is going to have an interesting decision. And to follow up what you said about him in San Antonio, I think he was bigger than we thought he was. And him as a route runner, man. I mean, for a guy that doesn't play year-round football, a ton of 7-on-7, I thought he was crisp and I thought he was polished in that department.
Yeah, Jurion Dickey as well, right? A guy that we had ranked as a 5-star in the top 32 last year. Still waiting for him to emerge. The Ducks, I would say, are in a very luxurious position, as they seem to be at a lot of positions across their roster. Drew, a couple more names as well. How about Dominic Kirks, man, from Ohio, was committed to Washington, ends up decommitting after Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama. Now Ohio State has a crystal ball there. He's kind of a pretty interesting 90 outside defensive lineman, high octane, high effort. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Columbus in a couple of years. All right, this is a guy that could make some waves there.
Yeah, it's kind of wonder, why wasn't Ohio State in on him earlier? And I think it goes back to kind of my theory, right? Early in the night at the bar, some of these options might not be number one for you, but you get closer to closing time and all of a sudden they're a lot more attractive. And for me, Dominic Kirks, I thought what he put on tape as a senior was encouraging. And Cooper, and especially in this player movement era, give me big functional athletes, right, that have that word you just said, a little bit of a motor. So, I think Dominic Kirks is a guy, you stash him on the roster. He's got the size, get him in the weight room, and then let's see what he looks like 2-3 years down the line. And if it doesn't work out, guess what, man? You can just replace him with someone else. But to me, looking at Ohio State, what they've done on the defensive line, he's a no-brainer, I think.
I'm still laughing at that analogy. We might have to throw that one in the recycling bin and maybe never bring it back up again. But hey, all worth a try here. All right, Drew, a couple other names. How about Amari Williams, the reclass from 25 to 24, the edge rusher out of the state of Florida. Florida State with the crystal ball there. And speaking of Florida State, 3-star quarterback Trevor Jackson will be walking on in Tallahassee at Florida State. That is the current pulse of that recruitment. Drew, I just want to kind of get your initial reaction to that one. We've been up, down, all around with been a crazy ride with him, from him impressing at the Elite 11 to him really not playing much as a senior. He was committed to Ole Miss. Ole Miss has got a handful of quarterbacks, right? Decommits, and we always wonder where he was going to end up. And now we have it. He ends up at Florida State as a preferred walk-on, maybe the highest ranked preferred walk-on in industry history. We're going to have to look that up, but your thoughts on that one?
I don't know if it's official, but I think the pulse is he is going to walk on at FSU. I believe he's also an early enrollee. I know there was some group of 5 schools that were fighting until the 11th hour during that early signing period, right? Remember, it's 3 days. We always focus on that Wednesday, but it goes until Friday night, and they were fighting and fighting and fighting for Trevor Jackson to sign paperwork, and they held out. I think they were hoping to see, after the coaching carousel, who would be looking for a quarterback. And I don't really know if there were a ton of options. To me, for Florida State, I mean, this is quite the steal. I mean, Trevor Jackson has not played a ton of football. Junior season was derailed a little bit by injury. Made a really interesting decision as a senior to transfer schools. Wasn't guaranteed the starting job. Ended up working behind a 2026 there at Orlando Jones that has some offers. And they would use Trevor Jackson as a runner, especially in the state playoffs. I think he ran for over 102 games. One of those was a regional final in a higher classification. I mean, he's a dynamic athlete, but he is someone that just needs the live reps, and he really didn't get them. So for Florida State, you bring him in, right? He's not taking one of your 85 counters. And I think it's ideal because Trevor has to realize, all right, I'm going to be working with the scout team, and that's what he needs. He needs to be practicing as much as he can. He needs to be facing a live pass rush. He needs to be in some interesting situations. So I think for Mike Norvell, Florida State, this makes a ton of sense. And if he does pan out, right, he does take the next step, then you just put him on scholarship. We've seen other guys do that in the past, these walk-on quarterbacks. So for Florida State, I think you should be grinning right now that you got this guy because, while he might be a little rough on the edges, I mean, the flashes have been there. He won the rail shot challenge at the Elite 11 finals. Like Cooper, he threw a better football in that setting than Caleb Williams, if I'm remembering correctly.
Which is pretty crazy, right? That guy who won a Heisman Trophy going to be the number 1 draft choice this upcoming draft as well. But yeah, Trevor Jackson, interesting story. I've always been a guy has been a big proponent of him, a big believer in him. I think it's circumstantial when it comes to his situation and maybe why he has not enjoyed the on-field success that you would expect from somebody as talented as him. But nonetheless, good recognition by Mike Norvell, his staff, to recognize the type of player and the caliber of potential that a player like Trevor Jackson has. Just get him on your roster, get him some reps. The expectations are low and let him develop. And if you're Trevor Jackson, like you said, Drew, the intrigue is that, yeah, you're going to play at a Power 5 program, but if it does not work out, right, what better place to be than Florida State, where you can then eventually transfer and there could be a hotter market for you at that time. I'm also pretty interested to see if this is one of those PWOs. Maybe Florida State was running up against the cap with their 85 and said, hey, we'll throw you a little bit of NIL money. Come here. We'd love to find a way to get you involved, and then we'll figure it out as we go. So that's the landscape of college football in the world that we are living in today. The best players available in 2024, like that segment. Like I said, the Oyster Boys will be on every Tuesday and Wednesday. How about every Monday? Well, you can find the 24/7 Sports College Football Recruiting Show. That will be on 5 o'clock Eastern time as well. Emily Proud, Blair Angulo, giving you everything you need to know around college football and college football recruiting as well. Great show. Make sure to give those guys a follow. All right, Drew, we've gone through the portal. We've gone through 2024. Now it's 2025, right? We got to get ready for the next cycle as well. And we've talked a lot about the things that have led to the transaction wire and a lot of guys committing and decommitting as we go. But let's start at the top. Top 247 edge, Zion Grady from the Montgomery area, the number 26 player in the country, the number 3 edge. Well, guess what? He decommitted from Alabama today. Drew, I think a guy that in the evaluation process, we're still trying to figure out, right? High motor, very productive in terms of the developmental upside. we'll see, right? This is going to be a guy that we're going to continue to monitor over the next year or so. But Drew, we talked enough about Caleb Downs and Ken Proctor to maybe understand why some of these defections are happening. Who's to gain for somebody like Zion Grady going back on the market?
I think it's Auburn, right? Tom Lloyd just wrote a story on 247sports.com. Grady was on the plains. I mean, we didn't really discuss that in Tuesday's episode. We highlighted schools that could take advantage, and I think we notably left out Auburn when that was a breakaway layup. I mean, maybe it was just an oversight for us, but Hugh Freeze has done excellent recruiting in-state since he has stepped in there. And now with Nick Saban not looking over his shoulder, I think he's only going to have more success in the Yellowhammer State. Zion Grady, I view him as a stand-up kind of 3-4 edge rusher. Want to see him at some point on the camp circuit, off-season circuit, just to get the body type this spring. How big can he get? Can he carry 255? Can he get to 265? What does he look like in terms of there? But his ability to get to the quarterback, two-time Class 5A defensive lineman of the year, past 2 seasons, 50 pressures, 32 sacks, 63 tackles for loss. I think he's a little more finesse than he is kind of edge masher at this stage, but it's easy to see why Auburn's looking. And Tom Loy also pointed out Georgia and Florida State set to get visits here with the contact period open. I mean, kids can visit schools. Had a bunch of junior days last weekend. We got more junior days on deck this weekend.
Not the only damage done to the Crimson Tide in the last 24 hours. How about top 247 edge Javian Hilson, number 46 player in the country, number 4 edge right there behind Zion Grady. Guess what? He flips from Alabama to Florida State, right? We've talked a lot about the teams that could be ready to pounce here, and we've talked a lot about Georgia. We've talked a lot about Auburn, Florida State getting in on the action here. Drew, this kind of coincides with the conversation that we just had. We're talking about the number 3 and number 4 edge rushers in the country, albeit a lot can change over the next year, and this is a 2025 cycle that we're talking about. But these are premium positions. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Even though that these guys are in the boat early, it doesn't take away from the importance of having these type of players in your program.
How about Alabama, right? All the way down. They've fallen from number 3 a week ago. I think they were number 3 in the 2025 cycle, the recruiting class, when Nick Saban announced that he was retiring or news broke. They're now sitting number 27th. I mean, there's only a handful of guys still committed. I thought all along that 2025 group was promising. I mean, there were some difference makers in there. It felt a little bit different than the 2024 recruiting class. Maybe it was tracking to be more like 2023 when they brought in Downs and Proctor, who have become the theme of this episode. But Hilson, guy I saw in person during the season when Coco took on St. Thomas Aquinas in one of the most controversial endings. I don't know if you remember me talking about that, Cooper, when the referees essentially awarded St. Thomas Aquinas a win. But he's got a long frame, right? Long frame, multi-sport kid, 5'10" in the high jump, 11.29 in the 100-meter dash. Why is that important? I always talk about it. You look at NFL draft trends. A lot of the pass rushers getting selected have promising track and field data. Javion Hilson has that. 97 tackles, 14 sacks, 3 forced fumbles for Coco this season. They ended up winning a state title in Florida. I think he's a bit rigid at times, but he covers a ton of ground, builds momentum, and he can change directions. So growth potential is there with Hilson. And how about Florida State? Number 11 class right now in 2025. All 4 of the commits are from the state of Florida. They got Solomon Thomas locked up. He's a kid out of the Jacksonville area, our number 1 ranked interior offensive lineman. And then Ethan Pritchett, kind of a versatile back 7 guy, maybe a linebacker, could be a safety, and Tramel Jones, a quarterback. I really like this group for Mike Norvell, parlaying that season they had into some success in the state of Florida, right now. A good start for the Seminoles.
Yeah, trying to capitalize on the year that they had throughout the Orange Bowl, right? Had a tremendous year. The good thing about Mike Norvell and that Florida State program, everything that they've done, whether it be the transfer portal, whether it be the high school ranks, they've just continued to ascend. They've gotten better and better every year. Part of the reason they're paying Mike Norvell $10 million a year now. So another big pickup from them. Drew, two more, this time not decommitments, but commitments. How about Terry and Grant, number 51 player in the country, number 6 corner out of the state of Tennessee, Murfreesboro. He's going to play for, guess who? Ryan Walters. How about that? Big one for Purdue and the Boilermakers. And then Jalen Wiggins, top 247 defensive line, big physical specimen out of the state of Florida. He's going to stay home and play for the Gators. Drew, your thoughts, quick thoughts on those two guys.
Terry and Grant. This one's fun. He'd be the second highest ranked signee all time for Purdue. Still early in the 2025 cycle. I mean, we'll see how the rankings shake out, but he is a long reactionary corner listed at 6'4". I would say he's probably closer to 6'3", 6'2", but elite track times. This guy can run. Lacks a little bit of ball production. I don't think a ton of passes have come his way, but for a guy that is as lean and as narrow as he is, he's got some impressive POA tape in terms of his ability to make tackles. I don't know. This one kind of fires me up about Purdue, just them going into SEC country and getting Grant committed. Now they're going to have to hold on to him, but it's a big deal. And Purdue, we saw Marco DeVilla at the All-American Bowl, their 2024 quarterback. I think me and you are both fans, not only of him, but of the fit there in West Lafayette. And then Coy Beasley, top 247 safety. He's turning some heads out at the Polynesian Bowl. So Purdue kind of getting it done on the talent acquisition front. They've also done it in the transfer portal as well.
Yeah, they're doing some things. They're pretty sneaky. You know, I like what Ryan Walters is doing. Obviously, they didn't have the year that he would have liked in his first year. Jamari Payne, another highly rated 3-star defensive lineman out of the state of Alabama. So Purdue, a team to watch. I love the success that they had in the state of Tennessee this past year as well. Damon Marble, another guy that I really like. So Purdue, team to watch. Florida, adding another guy that I think kind of checks their boxes, right? Jalen Wiggins. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a watered down version. I want to be careful here of a guy like Zach Harrison, the former 5-star who played at Ohio State, a guy that could play on the edge, ended up moving inside, more of a linear, explosive type of player, but a guy nonetheless that I think will be a productive player for Florida in the Gators. Drew, that about wraps it up. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Coop, I was going to bring this up earlier on, so I'm going to put you on the spot here, right? Out of all the true freshman offensive linemen that kind of played this past season, how many of these guys have been in the transfer portal or are in the transfer portal? You had Kadyn Green going from Oklahoma to Missouri. We don't know where Lance Hurd's going to end up. Now you got Kadyn Proctor. I mean, me and you are kind of like pound the table about building your offensive line through the high school ranks because it's not easy to get these guys in the transfer portal. I mean, do you have any raw reaction to that? Is this just kind of an unusual year with the coaching changes or whatnot? But it seems unfortunate for these schools that had been invested in these big bodies up front that they're just going to potentially lose them to someone else.
A little bit of both. I think Alabama is a little bit circumstantial, but at least the early feedback that we've gotten on the Kadyn Proctor situation is that Iowa is a team to watch. And if you go back to the recruitment, it goes back to yesterday's show, right? Why is it so important, even if you don't sign them the first time around, to have really strong relationships with these players? Well, you're seeing it right now. And the other one would be Kadyn Green, originally from the state of Missouri, enrolls at Oklahoma, ends up playing half the season starting at Oklahoma. There was some conversations whether or not he's going to be a tackler or guard, how that potentially played into it. I don't know. The only thing that I can really kind of put together is that both of these guys, at least one of them right now, and the other one looks like he's going to follow suit, they're heading home, right? So without that common denominator, which I think the common denominator in this particular situation was Kadyn Proctor, I think you're seeing the Alabama situation kind of play out where maybe guys were unsure where they were going to end up. Maybe Caleb Downs really didn't know whether it was going to be Ohio State, Notre Dame, Georgia, or Alabama. But at the end of the day, the thing that put him over the edge was Nick Saban. And with Nick Saban gone, why are they there? Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the question mark. So I think a lot of those guys are maybe looking at themselves in the mirror, having that internal conversation that they maybe had a little less than a year ago and saying, you know what, I got to recalibrate here. Is this the best spot for me to spend the next 2 to 3 years? And when it comes to offensive linemen, I don't know. Kadyn Green's situation seems a lot different than Kadyn Proctor's. I understand why Kadyn Proctor would make the decision that he made.
Yeah. Well, I just think of this kind of, always use the term current landscape. All right. But where we're at, if you're going to get one of these premium offensive linemen, you got to play them, right? You have to play them because the people that are supporting your program have made a financial commitment. They're going to want to see those guys on the field. So I don't know. Are we going to get to a point where you can tag a player and prevent them from just walking freely? I'm not sure. It seems like the NCAA has gone in the other direction.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is just because they've hit the portal doesn't mean they made the right decision, right? Like I think the Zalance Hurd situation is a guy playing with his food that he really can't afford to do that. Zalance Hurd, we love, right? Like coming out as a big, I wouldn't call it developmental, but as a guy who had all the raw elite traits, played a little bit as a freshman. He's on offensive line with Will Campbell, who he played with in high school. Emory Jones is a guy that's got tackle guard versatility. And then he's out of there. And you look at what LSU's done in the offensive line, especially under Brad Davis. That's a situation that you want to leave when there's a clear path for you somewhere in the next, 6 to 12 months to kind of see how that plays out, right? So you are willing to put that long-term upside in a vulnerable position for a short-term gain, whether that's going to a place like Tennessee, Oklahoma, or somewhere else where you don't know where it's going to shake out. It could work out for you, and if it does and you get paid more money in the meantime, congratulations. But that type of risk assessment, I think, is something that needs to come into play a little bit more. I don't think it is. I think you got a lot of people in these young kids' ear say, you know what, hey, there's more money on the table right now. I can get a piece of that slice of pie as well. You're missing out potentially on millions of dollars down the line because you're looking for early playing time and maybe $40,000 or $50,000 more. That I don't understand, and I think there's going to be a little bit of an equilibrium. I think a little bit of a balance over the next couple of years where, you know what, I would tip my hat to the guys. What we talked about earlier, John Talty, about him talking about, hey, yeah, these players going to Alabama because at a discounted rate because they knew that they were going to be developed. I think players are now going to look at their situation and say, you know what, is $50,000 to $75,000 worth me seeing the field immediately when I know that I'm getting coached and developed by the right person right now who's going to have my best long-term interests. And I think that needs to be more of the conversation than what it currently is right now. And I think you'll start to see a balance, but it is not there right now. I mean, we got agencies and tweets and we got all this foolishness. It is wild and it's absurd. And, your guys talking about business decisions and all that. I get it. Do what you got to do, but understand that the other shoe is going to drop at some point as well. So we will leave on that rant. Guys, thank you for watching. I appreciate our 24/7 sports director of scouting, as always, Andrew Ivins. Make sure to follow us on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We will be back next week. And like I said, make sure you are locked into 24/7 sports, whether it's 247sports.com or the YouTube channel. Guys, we appreciate you hanging with us, and we'll see you next week.